Hello, and welcome to FI for Kids, the podcast about guiding your kids towards financial independence and extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Dominic Delacqua. Our guest today is Gary Fujino. Gary has a lifelong history with individual sports, exercise, fitness, and the martial arts. He was able to quit his primary income job about 10 years before traditional retirement age and has since been able to focus his energies on his passion project, which is a small business, The Warrior Within, teaching self-defense to others. Welcome, Gary. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks.
So let's start with a little bit of your background. You've spent a lot of time in individual sports, but before that, your dad, he was more of a team sports guy, right? So tell us a little bit about that
Absolutely.
and then how you got into what drew you into individual sports versus team sports, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, so dad was born in 1918, right at the end of World War One. So he served in World War Two, part of the Japanese American community, but he was a big team sports guy. He was co-captain of his B football team because he was small. He couldn't make the varsity team, but he was always, really good at whatever sports he did. He was athletic and played basketball and baseball and football and whatever else they had. It's just all the normal sports. So he put me in the YMCA program when I was a kid, and I just absolutely did not crush it. I thought I am such a lame athlete. That's the picture I had at myself as a kid. Is like I'm not an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I suck at sports, and it was finding individual sports that I found my athletic self, which now I'm athletically and as far as like being in shape, much better than my peers my age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because I've been doing it forever, and that's probably we'll go more into just being disciplined about doing stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So for me, it was skateboarding, and then martial arts, both as a young kid, and then in high school, instead of doing any traditional sports, because I sucked at all of them, I went into gymnastics,
Mm-hmm.
did swimming, not so competitively, but just, my brother and sister were on the swim team, and I was just put in the swim. Every summer we were in swim class where the coach would just yell at you and make you do a gazillion laps. So, I mean, you get
Yep.
good at that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and then rock climbing and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, it's all individual sports for me, and there's some good and bad with it, I guess. The good is I'm not really relying on other people, and the bad is maybe I'm not such a good team player.
Mm-hmm. So you've stuck with a lot of those things for your whole life now.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about the idea of consistency over time and discipline and how important that is. And then we can maybe tie that into FI because I think right with kids, getting them to grasp onto things sometimes you have to approach them from where they are. And so some kids seem to be interested in money when they're younger. Well, most
Mm-hmm.
kids are not, but kids have always have some things they're interested in. So whether that's in your case, right, individual sports and martial arts and exercise, maybe that's a way to talk about those things and how you do well in those, and then how some of those things translate over into managing your money. Or, for other kids, it might be the arts or even team sports. It could be all sorts of things. So meeting them where they are, I think, is an important thing for parents to be aware of if they're trying to teach their kids about money, but it seems like they're running up against some walls. Using other things to get through can be really beneficial, I think. So just give us your thoughts about exercise and what you've learned over the years about the importance of discipline and consistency, good, bad, whatever.
I think it goes way back to when I was a kid. So when I was and there's a particular story I tell, which is to my students, especially my female students of that I'm trying to empower with martial arts and self defense, is that I've always been small. I'm the average height of the average female in the U.S. I'm 5'3", 5'3", 5'4" is the average height of the woman in the U.S. So So I was bullied when I was a kid. Second
Mm.
grade, I remember these two Simone brothers, and they were like a head taller than me.
Yeah.
And every day they'd come up and like, hey kid, give me a quarter, right? So I'd give them a quarter, right? Mom gave me 50 cents for lunch and they took a quarter. So I
Mm.
get to eat every other day, whatever, right? So 2 weeks goes by and I'm at wit's end. I never told my parents, never told my teachers, never told anybody. And one day they came up and I'm just like, no. I just balled up my fist and I closed my eyes because I knew I was going to get knocked out. And because I had no skill at that
Hmm.
time. And they laughed and they walked away. And so I learned two important lessons, which I couldn't verbalize at the time. But the two lessons were you got to stand up to your bullies. And the second lesson was learn to set boundaries. And I couldn't back up the boundary then, which is why I asked my parents put me in martial arts because I want to be able to back it up.
You sure?
And probably from that start, I felt the need to be able to defend myself in whatever situation, and that kind of started the growth in the martial arts. And it's just I like physical activity. I think that started me on the path, and I think that all those individual sports that I did, which you're reliant on yourself and maybe your coach, but not so much team members, is why um, I have the discipline to work out and do stuff on my own. I've never needed a workout partner. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have a gym buddy, so I don't really go to the gym. Well,
Hmm.
that's never bothered me. And so being disciplined in something wasn't so much an issue. I think it's taking that discipline and then applying it to different sports, or not different sports, but different parts of your life. Doing something I like, and for the viewers out there, I would say, we introduced a lot of different stuff to our kids.
Hmm.
Some of it stuck, some of it didn't.
Sure.
You're just trying to find your passion in your kids. So my passion I found early, which was martial arts.
Hmm.
I bought my first gun like 22 years old, and I've been shooting ever since then.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just finding that passion. And I think you find that passion, it's not hard to do. It's simply doing what you enjoy.
Let's maybe tie that in with you've you were able to quit working sort of your main income, which was a solid, middle class, upper middle class job, right? But you were able to stop doing that, before a traditional retirement age. But you've also led a rich sort of fulfilling life. You've done a lot of outdoor things. You've traveled a lot with your family. You guys have been all over the place. So it's not,
Mm-hmm.
you've taken long periods off, even when you were still working, to go do lengthy outdoor trips and hikes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you were living some life of deprivation to get to that point where you could quit working early. So in a sense, I guess you were pursuing different passions that you had, but along the way, you also had to be disciplined with what you were doing with your money. So talk a little bit about your thoughts there. Did you take any lessons from what you learned being fit over a long period of time? And you were interested in it, so it was easier for you than maybe it is for some people. But you still had to be consistent with it. And as you went maybe from one passion in terms of rock climbing to martial arts or back to the other or outdoor stuff, hiking, as those things changed a little bit, you still kept up with a fitness routine. So talk about your thoughts there with staying consistent with those things. What motivated you to stay consistent with the physical exercise? And are there any similarities or parallels you see between that and being disciplined with how you're managing your money?
My love of fitness is just that. I love being fit. I love being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And most of the things I like to do have to do with being fit, whether that's going on a hike or a bike ride or just, I love exercise. So just being able to do exercise. But if I have to tear up the yard to re-landscape my backyard, I don't have to stop because all of a sudden I got tendonitis from not being in shape or whatever. So the other aspect of that, I guess, is going back to as a kid, like being able to defend myself anytime, anywhere against anyone. Um, So, as far as financial lessons, I didn't learn a lick from my parents other than just through observation, which I think most people, unless, and we weren't well off, we weren't poor, but we were lower middle class, I would say.
Hmm.
And I took a course in college at Cal State Long Beach, which was an upper division IC course called Consumer Survival. And it was taught by a bankruptcy lawyer.
Hmm.
This guy was freaking phenomenal. He he was Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was around.
Hmm.
It was basically the same stuff. He said most people live at the edge of the pit of financial disaster.
Yeah.
And so one little disaster happens, water heater goes out, your car takes a dump, whatever it is, boom, all of a sudden you have no money. You're borrowing money to pay your expenses. So the first thing you do is you establish an emergency fund. That way you're backing off the pit, right?
Hmm.
And then you start saving for various purchases. Another thing he emphasized was not indulging yourself on a daily basis with whatever it has just because you have coin in your pocket, right? So don't buy those $5 Starbucks every day because that doesn't get you anywhere. What if you save those $5 a day at Starbucks and you invested it? Where would that take you? Right. So that's, I guess, how discipline would take you. But trying to pay everything cash. And if you can do that, you really don't have, there are periods of time you can take off and not worry about your money. And so you've mentioned that, the family is always like gone on vacations. Like when my wife and I got married, our parents helped us a little. My wife's parents helped a little with the wedding, but we paid for at least half of it. And then our honeymoon was 6 weeks. We took a 6 week break. As soon as we got married, we went to Thailand, Japan, and the Philippines. So
Hmm.
I'm Japanese heritage and my wife's Filipino. And we love Thai food. So why not throw that in there too? So we
Yeah.
spent 2 weeks in each country. And, it was the trip of a lifetime and something we can always remember. And we've been back to those countries as well. But um, those lessons that I learned early on have stuck with me. And I guess maybe it's the discipline of what I like to do, which is exercise, that I've been able to apply it to financial, whether it's savings or, I like to think that when I exercise, I don't do the same exercise all the time. I don't just run, right? I like flexibility because I was a gymnast and I was a rock climber. So flexibility is real important in martial arts too. So I stretch, I do yoga, I do strength training. I like to lift weights. And that's kind of a diversification of your physical fitness.
Hmm.
Well, I think diversifying your portfolio as well. So not only do I have kind of the standard 401k kind of stocks, bonds kind of stuff, but I also have crypto and I also have I own real estate and I own some precious metals. And so diversifying yourself, I think, is important in your kind of your financial journey as well.
Right. So what I hear in that is you started off in a good place, right? You got some basic education early on, which is even in the most simple way, like don't go into debt and set aside an emergency fund, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that because that's your financial stability. And now you've got a solid foundation with which to build from. And
Yeah,
then you
absolutely.
can, if you continue to make sort of smart choices, this is classic FI thinking, right? Which is you save more than you spend. So you know what your expenses are and you save, and you try to increase that savings rate as much as you can, because then you take that savings once you've got, 3, 6 months or so of your expenses sort of set aside for your financial stability, right? That emergency
Mm-hmm.
fund. Then you keep up with that savings rate so that you can invest that money so that it can then grow for you. So now you're working towards that financial independence beyond just being financially stable. So so I hear that in there, but then I also hear that but you were doing things, right? So, you've diversified and you've got different interests, and that makes sense. And so there's a tie in there with your money. but you guys continued to do trips. And so I guess my next question would be, how did you balance maintaining financial stability, doing the things that you really like to do, but also making sure that you had excess money each month? Because just to back up for a quick second, I think, right? So kind of what you mentioned, people being at that edge, what happens a lot of times is they're making money
Right.
and they're like, great. And then they start spending it. They want this, that, and the other toy, and they want all these things, and they're not
It's
paying
easy
enough
to do.
attention. They haven't really identified what it is they really value. And they're doing well in their career, and then they get a raise. They're like, well, great. Now we have more money, and then let's get a nicer house or let's get a new car, even though we've only had this one for a couple of years. And they're so busy doing that they never find the discipline to start setting that money aside and really sort of building for their financial future. And it's analogous to me for people who, oh my gosh, I'm getting a little older now and I'm feeling a little more sluggish, or I'm feeling a little heavier than I used to, and I really should do something about that. And they'll start to exercise, but then it falls off, or they want to eat right and they'll stick with it for a while, and then it falls off, and they struggle to find that consistent discipline over time, and then they can never really get to sort of where they want to be. So how did you and your wife manage that balance of having a life that was really full and rich, and also making sure you had money left over each month to continue to invest so that you could continue to have that sort of enriched life?
When you're talking to your patients, you hear a lot of stories, right? And I've never heard a patient say, and this is very common in the financial world, is that I wish I would have spent more time at work. I've
Hmm.
never heard that from anybody that is like nearing their deathbed or too old to do what they want to do.
Hmm.
So we decided a long time ago when we first got married, I loved athletics and Millette loved travel. And so she got me the travel bug. Once I started to experience travel, I'm like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Right. They say travel is the only expense that makes you richer. And I have to agree with that, because your perspective on the world, of your country, of other people completely changes. And people that don't travel, I think, maybe lack something there. Um, but one thing you pointed out is you have to have delayed gratification. You can't just take your raises and buy whatever you want. So for most of our adult lives, our budget was pretty tight. We didn't have a whole lot of extra money to do stuff, especially raising kids. Kids are expensive.
Hmm.
As anyone that has kids will tell you. But the other thing is that Millette and I were always on the same page. We're both pretty frugal, and so we don't spend extravagantly, and that is a huge marriage saver. If one's a spender and one's a saver, holy smokes. So I think talking these things out when you get married, when you decide to have a partnership, whether that's a partner in life or a partner in business, you have to hash out a lot of this stuff. And we have very similar values in that way, which really helps, I think, in saving and having common financial goals as well as common goals of doing the stuff we like to do, whether it's travel or, hanging out with the kids or whatever it is.
So speaking of your kids, what did you guys teach them about money? So you didn't learn anything from your parents when you were growing up, you said. What did you guys teach your kids when they were growing up?
I don't know, maybe not a whole lot directly,
Hmm.
but maybe through osmosis of observation. When they would want stuff and ask for stuff, I'm like, we don't have the spare cash for that. They're like, Dad, you got money. I'm like, yeah, but it's not earmarked for that.
Right.
Right. I'm just going to give you money just because I have it. Right. You got to earn it. You got to earn your own money. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, but so and so's parents gave them that. I'm like, well, good for them. Go live over there if you want to.
You said
But I'm
that's
like,
That's how my dad would be. He had comments like that when I was a kid. We always had dinner together, and he was Italian, and he just grew up with a bunch of brothers, and they just argued all the time. And so he and I would oftentimes argue at the dinner table, and you know, he'd get to a point where like, that's all right, that's enough. Or now we're done. And I would say whatever. He goes, look, you don't like it? There's the door. Swings both
There's the
ways.
door.
Don't let it hit you on the way
Yeah.
out. Classic. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So, we did make them save money. I guess we didn't spend a whole lot of time. I probably could have done a better job with that as far as explaining why you want to save money. I mean, I think we touched on it. It's like, you don't want to be broke when you want something that you really want. You got to save for it. You got to be, you got to be disciplined to save money. And whenever they would get money for Christmas presents or birthday, we would let them spend a portion of it, and the rest would go into their college fund or whatever it was, right?
Hmm.
And so kind of that's pretty much what we did for them for teaching them lessons. And then like Tomio moved out for a little bit, went to dorm for a little bit, and then he came back, and then I started making him pay a little bit of rent. And it wasn't so much because I wanted to make money off him. It was kind of a forced savings.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
when he did move out, he had a little bit of money that I basically just collected all of it and saved it,
Yeah.
and then just gave it to him when he moved out. So I think that kind of is a lesson to him as far as, oh look, wow, okay. I mean, there wasn't any interest in it or anything, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I just talked to another couple recently, and they did, and I talked to them before, and they've done this with their kids. So, they let their kids move back in. They have a basement apartment. They let them move back in for free, with the understanding is you're here for free, but then you're saving money, so you can get your own house or for whatever it is you're trying to save money for. If
Mhm.
and if that changes, and all of a sudden you're showing up with a brand new fancy car out in the driveway, then the living for free is off, and then maybe if you can afford those things, you can afford to pay us rent. And
Makes
and
sense.
so I mean, they've approached it a little bit differently, but a similar concept, right? And they have four kids, and the two that have sort of been through that process so far have been able to do that, right? They live there for free, as long as they needed to, saved up their money, and then were able to use that as down payments for their own homes. So
Nice.
yeah.
My cousin, who retired at 50, he called me one day and he says, "Hey, Gary, I'm retiring." I'm like, "Well, good for you, Bill." He says, "You know what? Retirement's a function of money, not time." So I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, good for you. What are you going to do, right? Travel and fish and travel. That's all he did. Travel and fish and travel for 6 months. That's all he did. He came home and he was bored out of his gill. So his wife says, Bill, go back to work."
That's funny.
Because he's a workaholic. He
Yeah.
actually worked until he was probably in his mid 70s. And the only reason he quit was to kind of take care of his wife with her health problems. But he'd
Uh,
probably still be working now.
yeah.
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 Um,
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we named the podcast FI for kids and not FIRE, right? So FI, financial independence, and it kind of started, as the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early.
mm,
And if you start when you're still a young adult and you do it right, people can reach financial independence in their 30s. But a lot of people then don't necessarily want to just retire and then sit around and do nothing. That's not really much of a quality of life. And the whole thing about financial independence is it's all about giving yourself more opportunities and a richer, more fulfilling life. And money's just the tool that you use to get there.
options. Right.
And so the retire early part really is optional. But what it does
Mhm.
allow you to do, right? So I'm doing Coast FI now, which means, I didn't get my act together with money early enough that I could sort of do that. I'm fully financial independent. But at Coast FI, it's like, you know what? I was able to step away from, a good paying job that I had and not work for a long period of time because I had plenty of money saved up, plenty of money invested, but then it allowed me to make changes where all I have to do now is earn enough to just sort of pay my monthly expenses, and the money that I have invested can continue to grow on its own over time, right? And I'll reach financial independence at a slower rate, but I also don't have to keep working a job that was more demanding, that was changing, that required a lot of travel, and now I'm able to sort of spend less time working, and it's not so focused on trading my time for money, and it's not so much focused on strictly the income, right? And so if you
Nice.
can achieve something like that when you're younger, so I know you've got a daughter that really likes the arts, and she's creative
Hmm.
in that way and does music and other arts things. If she were at a point where she were financially independent, in her 30s or even 40s, that would allow her to then explore those things in whatever way she wanted because she wouldn't be dependent on them for an income. Because
Right.
it's hard to make an income in the arts oftentimes, right? I mean, lots of people want to be
Hmm.
writers or musicians or artists or whatever it might be, actors, and that can be a really difficult way to make a living. But if you can be financially independent, then you can pursue those things all you want because you're not dependent on them for your financial stability and your income. So,
Absolutely.
so there's something else I want to get into. Let me set this up for a second. So I think so in the FI world, there are there's no one right path to get there, but there are certain common principles that apply to achieving financial independence at a younger age than traditional retirement age. And those things would be obviously managing your money, tracking your money so that you know what your expenses are, having a much higher than normal savings rate so that you have a lot left over to then invest, right? So you can have that money grow for you. And
Hmm.
that's how you get to your FI number faster. But in order to do that, you have to identify what it is that you really value and what things bring you joy. Because you've
Hmm.
got to make choices about where am I spending money and where am I not spending money. We could get a new house, we could do a renovation, we could buy a boat, we could get a lot of toys, we could eat out 5 nights a week. There are lots of things people could buy new clothes or new shoes or whatever it is that their thing is all the time. And you get momentary satisfaction from those things. But a lot of times with those purchases, that's all it is it's you get that quick oxytocin hit, a momentary satisfaction, and then it's gone. And then it's almost like a drug. And then it's like, well, then you've got to keep doing that. And I
Hmm.
think unfortunately a lot of people sort of fall into that trap. So if you want to really move towards FI at a quicker pace, you've got to identify what is it that I do actually really value, and I'll spend money on that. You guys identified, you know what, you wanted money to spend on doing physical things, whether that was doing Boy Scouts and doing camping and hiking, or whether it was the martial arts or time for exercise, and you wanted the time and the money set aside to travel because that really added a lot to your lives. But then you gave up other things. Not that when I say gave up, you didn't go without, you didn't live a life where you were like, there was deprivation, but you were just making choices.
Hmm.
And so that's fundamental to the FI world. So, but how you get there and exactly what you spend that money on and your route or how quickly or not you want to get there is always different. It's like a puzzle, right? And it's always different for different individuals. There's no one right way to pursue FI. So as people do this, there are certain principles they need to apply, but how they tailor them for themselves, they need to, it's a process of ongoing discovery and ongoing revision and discipline and practice. When you practice the martial arts, you never fully arrive. It's something you continue to do,
Hmm.
right? And it's always evolving. And so Bruce Lee, is well known in the martial arts world, and a lot of people say, well, he developed his own style. And if you're familiar with Bruce at all, like he didn't. The whole point of Jeet Kune Do is it was not a style; it's an approach to the martial arts. How you perform as a martial artist is your own individual expression of your study of the martial arts. But in Jeet Kune Do, for example, there are certain common principles. So I just wanted to talk about those because I see parallels between certain principles in the martial arts. So if we just talk about the Jeet Kune Do approach, right, certain principles that fit into that, but then how you manifest those is always going to be different, right? So you and I might do some Jeet Kune Do or Kali things together, and we've studied the same things, and there's going to be certain core principles, but how we choose to manifest those or react to other things is going to be different. So
Absolutely.
just talk a little bit about some of the common elements, common approaches in Jeet Kune Do?
Um, Interesting question. And I think it's applicable in a lot of areas of life.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, Bruce's philosophy has to do with his study of philosophy, but also his study of the martial arts, which he then tried to portray in his movies. Um, but the idea behind what he did, and I didn't learn directly from Bruce. I learned from Dan Inosanto, who was Bruce's training partner for 12 years.
Hmm.
Eventually, Dan Inosanto took over Bruce's teachings and all of his students when Bruce went to Hong Kong to do all his films. But it's a principle based and not a technique based practice. So techniques are like an outside block, an inside block, a punch, right? A hook, a jab, a cross. And so those are techniques. What makes the technique better are the attributes that you bring to the table. And the attributes are like the ingredients to making a cake. So if you put everything into a cake, but you forget one ingredient, like sugar, are you going to have a cake?
Well,
It
not
may
a very good
look like a
cake.
cake, right?
Yeah.
But it's certainly not going to taste like a cake. Uh, what you may put out may look very similar, but it's not going to be the real thing. And so the attributes in the martial arts are economy of motion, line familiarization, strength, power, speed, timing, footwork, proper distancing, proper having the right mental attitude, having killer instinct. So all these things are attributes that make a fighter good at what he does. So I think Bruce studied 19 or 23 different martial arts that he formulated into what he was pressured into calling Jeet Kune Do, which is way of the intercepting fist, because that's what he did. His attributes allowed him to hold center line and intercept you with his punch or kick quicker than you can attack him with your hooks or whatever. And so it is by knowing yourself, by knowing what attributes you hold and you are good at and you can develop to make you the best martial artist that you can be, is what's going to get you there. So even though you can have, like, if you and I studied the same arts, because you have a different body build, you have different physical attributes than I do, your martial art will look completely different, even though we study exactly the same thing. But like Bruce said, it's man, the individual is always more important than the art or style or system. And so how that applies to the financial world is, like you said earlier, you have to know what it is you want in life, what brings you joy, what's your ikigai, right? Ikigai is the Japanese term for what is your life purpose.
Hmm.
So initially, when I was a youngster going through college, I found my ikigai, which was physical therapy. I It took me 12 years to get my 4 year degree. Okay, I'm a little slow, but I found what I really like to do, and I feel like I was really good at it because I found something that brought me joy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was able to pursue that and get my degree and be in that field for over 30 years and pretty much enjoy my career. It's only because of changes in healthcare or office politics. Those are the parts I really don't like, but love helping people, love doing therapy. Same thing I do with the Warrior Within is I like to help people and I like to train people and I like to teach.
So
Um,
Gary,
yeah.
um, while you're on that, so you're talking about the martial arts and it's attribute based, not technique based, and then in talking about your career as a therapist, and in both those things, one of the common threads that I see between your study of the martial arts, your becoming a physical therapist, and teaching your kids and someone pursuing FI is, like you said, you do have to know yourself and how you want to approach it, but also there are there are technical things that you need to learn, right? So
Mm-hmm.
your expression of the martial arts is different from mine, but you still have to learn the basic techniques, right? You still have to learn
Absolutely.
efficient ways to throw a kick and throw a punch and defend,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
and you have to learn the footwork. You have to do a lot of learning to earn your physical therapy degree. So there's a lot
Right.
of data and knowledge and information that you need so then you can then determine, okay, now that I've got this, how do I express it? And physical therapy is no different than the martial arts in that way, right? Like, you've worked with a lot of therapists over the years, and how a different therapist might approach the same patient will always vary a little bit, even though there are certain commonalities there. And I
Hmm.
think with teaching kids to manage their money and then teaching them about investing, it's the same kind of thing. So, and talking about FI, money is a tool in order to sort of have this more fulfilling, more joyful, bigger life. But you still have to learn the basics of money management. You have to learn the basics of investing, and those things never end. You can continue to learn those, continue to make refinements and tweaks. It becomes a practice in the same way that doctors practice medicine, therapists practice physical therapy, martial artists practice the martial arts. It's never
Hmm.
done. You just sort of something that you're always doing and refining. So,
Absolutely.
anyway, that I just wanted to kind of tie all those things together because I know it can seem a little weird sometimes. Why are you doing these episodes about extras, these things that seem like they don't have anything to do with financial independence for kids? But my whole point is that they do, right? There's all this crossover in all kinds of ways of life. And so I think it's just interesting sometimes to talk about these seemingly disconnected things that really share a lot more in common than oftentimes we realize. But it's good to talk about them sometimes or kind of look at them, and it just helps you. It's almost like travel in a sense, right? And that it helps you see life from a little bit different angle. And sometimes that helps lead to sort of new and interesting conclusions that can make your
Hmm.
life better. And sometimes it just helps your understanding of other people and other things. Let's let's go back to, yeah, I think you were transitioning from sort of physical therapy was your ikigai for a long time. You eventually sort of decided, okay, I'm ready to move on from that. Why don't you talk for a little bit just about what you're doing now? Since for you, right, in an FI sense, that's you putting your time and energy into something that isn't not making you the money you were making as a therapist, but it's something that you're really passionate about. It's your ikigai now. It's your purpose. So talk to us about the warrior within for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. So the Warrior Within, it's a business I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've always loved the martial arts. And because of therapy, all we do is teach people exercise and teach people like body mechanics and things like that. So my love of teaching and helping, integrated with my love of the martial arts, it kind of came as a natural evolution.
Sure.
And so, I've also been into firearms since my 20s. And I feel like that's the ultimate martial art as far as a self defense situation. Now, some people say, oh, it doesn't take anything for a guy to pull a trigger. There's a lot of discipline behind it. And I take the same approach for my martial arts as I do to firearms. To me, it's just another discipline that I apply myself in. So what is the warrior within? Well, what we do is we help people to defend themselves, to basically live your fullest life without fear of being bullied or intimidated, or being able to live a full life as you choose it to be, while also covering your six, or making sure you take care of yourself.
Hmm.
So whether that's protecting yourself against a home invasion, you can do certain things like, for instance, I have a perimeter of lights around my house. So lights pop on as soon as you walk up to my house at night. I scan Nextdoor, the app, which gives me a feeling for the kind of crime that goes on in my neighborhood. And then having defensive tools at the ready. So my doors are hardened. I have, instead of the regular strike plates, which are about that big, I have 8-inch long with 3-inch screws. So it takes like 6 to 8 kicks to get into the door, which does what? It gives me time to get to a gun in case somebody wants to do a home invasion. So just having layers of protection against your home is just one example. But I also teach women empowerment. So teaching women how to not be a target. So one of my courses in my self-defense fundamentals, we don't really much go into the punching and the kicking. We don't go into firearms. We don't even do pepper spray at that point. It's just basically how to be aware of your surroundings. And when you and I go out, we're always fighting for that chair where your back is against the wall and you're watching the environment. But that's just part of it, having that awareness. So the color codes of awareness, being able to set boundaries, use your voice and eye contact as a means to defend yourself. Having those simple tools can keep you out of trouble, I would say 95% of the time.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Gary, and that's a really cool thing that you bring up, actually. This and not there's nothing to do with FI, but I think just the ability, because some people just have a natural assertiveness to their presence, and I think predators, whether they realize it or not, pick up on that, and they tend to move on from those people, and other people just present for whatever reason as more vulnerable. And predators, right? They're tuned into those things. Again, whether they're directly aware of it or not, they're still tuned into those things. They're predators, and
Yeah.
they'll be drawn towards those people. So teaching people that basic idea of pay attention and be
Yeah.
able to sort of present a
Nope.
little bit of a buffer and have a little
Nope.
bit of a
Yeah.
presence, I think
Right.
is super important. And yeah, I think you're right.
Can I tell a
Would you?
quick story?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one of the things that I teach in my course is they did a study, which they've redone the study recently with basically the same results. So they took film of people in the street, just people
Hmm.
wandering around, mall and parking lots, the shopping, whatever, right? And they went into the penitentiary and they asked criminals that were
Hmm.
all convicted of different assaults, and they asked them who would be your targets. They all picked the same people,
Hmm.
and all
Hmm.
these people look like victims.
Yeah.
If you have your head on a swivel, you make eye contact with people, you set boundaries, you stand a little bit taller, you walk confidently, just simple things like that. The
Yeah.
three letters that criminals hate the most are ICU.
If
Yeah, yeah.
people have any questions or they're interested in any of your self-defense courses, how can the listeners find you?
You can check my website, which is train-tww.com, which is Train the Warrior Within. And you can find the Warrior Within on Instagram and Facebook, etc. So, yeah, look me up.
Okay, great. And I'll
More
put those
happy
things
to
in
have a
the,
conversation or help you out.
yeah, great. Okay. I'll put those things in the show notes too, so people can find those and just click on the links.
Oh,
So
cool.
any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think what you're doing is really cool. I certainly have regrets in my financial journey. I've had lots of stumbling blocks like everybody else has. If you talk to most millionaires, especially people that have built businesses, they've gone broke more than once.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of keeping at it. You just keep at it. You have faith and you just keep at it.
Well,
And
hey man, that's perfect because it's just like exercise, right? Or just like the
yeah,
martial arts. It's consistency over time and you have setbacks and you get right back on and you keep working. And if you're consistent over time, you'll get there.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, man.
Okay. All right. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please tell a few others about the show, leave us a 5-star review, and if you haven't already, please subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, or wherever you get your pods. Our intro and exit music this episode are courtesy of Douglas Cameron, and because it's a new year and we've just done 2 episodes on the similarities between exercise and FI, the exit music is here to pump you up. You can find Doug's music at douglascameron.net or Spotify. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.